Behind the Mirror of Music with Dannii Cohen.
Hello, and welcome to Behind the Mirror of Music. My name is Dannii Cohen. This week's guest is James Romick. James Romick performed on Broadway for 23 years, including a long run as part of the original cast of The Phantom of the Opera. During his time on the show, James performed the roles of the Phantom, Raoul, Andre, Firmin, and many others. James also starred in 1776, Camelot, Oklahoma, and South Pacific, and is now a much sought after audiobook reader. I hope you will enjoy the show.
Hi, Dannii. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Okay. We'll see how this goes.
What are you doing right now in your life and career?
Right now, I keep on saying it's about the fifth or sixth iteration of my acting career. I'm narrating audiobooks. Which is why I have the headphones on. I have my little microphone right here, and my recording studio is just on the other side of this wall. So I lock myself into a small space and talk to myself for hours at a time. Hopefully, for somebody to buy my audiobooks. I have I think I'm closing in on about 200 audiobooks on Audible right now. Between me and my pseudonym, I use a pseudonym for certain things. Basically, they call them cozy romances, no swear words, no overt sex, things like that. I mean, as sexy as they get is going to be She Sat on His Lap. That's about it. And Westerns, clean, cozy Westerns, things, not a lot of swear words, although some of the Westerns I do, there are gunfights and people die. So, but the reason I chose a pseudonym, a lot of people use pseudonyms when they do things like erotica. Somebody's doing children's books and they don't want the their audience to know that they're also doing these really hot, steamy novels with sexual content. I was approached by a woman to do a nice romance. And I was at that time narrating a lot of post-apocalyptic, end of the world, really nasty kind of stuff. Lots of swear words, lots of just nasty material, which I loved. But when she approached me, I said, "Would you mind if I used a pseudonym for this? Because you may not want to be associated with me because of what I do. But this guy is really nice. He uses complete sentences. He doesn't drink. He doesn't smoke. He never had sex out of marriage. He's just a really nice guy." And you'd probably want to use him. So the persona I created for the romances and for my westerns, he's a really nice guy. He's like, it's like that old joke, roses are red, violets are blue, I'm schizophrenic and so am I. Uh, I have a split personality, and part of that has been with me kind of all my life because when I was in the show, I was what was known as a swing, and I covered all the men except for the dancer because I can't dance. Don't ask me. But I covered all the men in the show except for Piangi, the fat tenor, and they asked me to understudy him 3 times, and I said no because I didn't want to do all that rehearsal. But um, I've always been sort of a right brain, left brain sort of person. I solve problems, but at the same time, I'm creative. That personality shift between me and my pseudonym was kind of interesting for me.
How did you start doing audiobooks? Is it
Well, I was searching for something when I left the show, not voluntarily, by the way, but when I left the show, I was sort of thrown out into the woods trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I have a house, I had a wife, I had 4 dogs at that time, I had responsibilities, and the only work that I was really finding theater-wise was going out on the road. And I just didn't want to live out of a suitcase. I was at a point in my life where I just didn't want to tour. I didn't want to live out of a suitcase. So I wanted to stay home. So I made up my mind that maybe I will pursue on-camera commercial work because that's money. It's good money. And I'm in SAG-AFTRA, so I'm a union performer. Always have been for most of my performing life. And I landed a commercial agent, but it just wasn't panning out. It wasn't, I wasn't really booking. I did a couple, but I wasn't really booking that regularly. And they also had a voiceover department. And they knew that I was a singer because I'm a trained opera singer. We'll get into that in a minute, I guess. But they said, you got this great voice. Let me introduce you to the voiceover guy. And I said, no, 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 don't do that because I don't know anything about that world. I said, give me a little bit of time to find out what it is. Give me some time to study, to know what that world is all about. And then I'll talk to this guy and see what we can do. Well, about 3 months later, I went to, they called them sessions. It was kind of a class. And the voiceover agent was there. And I read some copy for him and said, yeah, we can use you. Come into the office on Monday and we'll talk. So I went in, I signed a contract. I went out on 4 auditions that day for voiceover. So that was the 5th iteration of my acting career. So it was the out of town stage, Broadway, trying to get into commercials and film, on-camera stuff, voiceover stuff, that's 5. And then 6 is audiobooks because I wasn't booking the commercials regularly. I was having marginal success. But I investigated doing audiobooks. And it's not that I love it. It's a lot of work. But because I am an actor and I tell, there used to be kids groups that would come to the show after the show, and we'd have little talks with them. And I would say, how many of you want to be in a musical? And they'd get all these hands raised. And I said, how many of you, really want to act? And they would raise their hands. I said, there was an old actor. His name was Rod Steiger, movie actor, and he played a lot of, I think it was On the Waterfront and a whole bunch of other movies. But his thing was you become an actor not because you want to be an actor, but because you need to be an actor. And I became an actor because I needed to be an actor. And when the live performing stuff and the commercial stuff sort of dried up and the voiceover stuff wasn't working for me, the only acting outlet that I could find now was to do audiobooks because I have to be all those characters. So I create all of those characters for myself. And I just find it rewarding. It fills it satisfies my muse, I guess.
How did you fall in love with acting and music?
I went to school to be a music teacher. I was fortunate when I was in high school. I went to a very small high school that the band and the chorus, both of the band director and the chorus director and successive other people that came in after that were very, very good musicians and very good teachers. And I wanted to be a music teacher. I thought that was the only avenue that was open to me. So my mother was a teacher, and I was a percussionist in the band. But I also was in a lot of the things in the chorus. I was in the general chorus, and then we had what was known as a madrigal group, which was, 4-part, maybe 4 people for each 4 parts, soprano, alto, tenor, bass. So it was a smaller group. We also formed a barbershop quartet that I was in, and a whole lot of other things. And my last choir director pushed me into, searching out being a voice major. So I went and I auditioned a local university. I went to Youngstown State University, the Dana School of Music at Youngstown State University, and I auditioned for the voice department. They gave me a scholarship. So I had a 4-year scholarship for voice, and that's what I went into. I've always loved music. I've always loved singing. You know how athletes sometimes tell you about the endorphins that they get when they're playing football or basketball or whatever, and lifting weights or whatever. I get the same kind of kick when I'm singing because your voice is a muscle just like any other muscle, and I get the same kind of thrill. Um, when I was younger, I would sing for hours and hours and hours at a time. I remember when I discovered I wanted to be a classical musician. I really didn't have an affinity for opera. I didn't really know it and I really didn't understand it. But one of my voice teachers was the opera director at the school. And I did a couple operas because he was my voice teacher. But I really didn't have affinity for it. But I did 3 musicals in high school. And when I got into college, I started doing musicals not only in school and I got connected with the drama department, but I also got connected with the local community theater, a couple of them actually. And I started doing performances there. My first big role, I think, was Thomas Jefferson in 1776. I was 19 years old. So I was one of the youngest people in the cast, but it uh, that first opening number, that Sit Down John number in 1776, all those big male voices, and we had not a full orchestra, but we had a pretty good size orchestra for a community theater, and it was just sent chills up your spine. It and it was like, okay, this is what I want to do. So I fell in love with musical comedy rather than opera, and that's what I wanted to make a living at.
I think in the past, musicals had more classical sound, so you could always combine opera
Yeah,
with.
the older stuff. I mean, the stuff that they're doing today is just, real pop.
Yes.
And I think some of that started with, I thought it was going to be interesting when Tommy came out, the Who's Tommy. Uh, like I said, I went to school to be a classical musician, but I also found rock and roll in college. I knew rock and roll. I grew up in the late 60s, early 70s, but I really kind of discovered, I think the first thing I really discovered was progressive rock. One of my favorite bands when I was in high school was Yes. And I listened to those albums, Fragile and Close to the Edge. I listened to those albums until the Curly Cues were coming off. That was, vinyl at the time, until Curly Cues were coming off on the needles. And also, um, Jesus Christ Superstar. I
Yes.
would sing to that like nobody's business when I was in high school, when I was coming up, which is strange that I wound up working for the man after a while. But um, wanted to be a cross between Roger Daltrey and Roger Waters from Pink Floyd. So Roger Daltrey from The Who, Roger Waters from Pink Floyd, and Bruce Springsteen. So I wanted to be, a combination of those 3 guys. And when I was in college, I was still kind of living at home at one point, and it was, I think, around 1979 when Sweeney Todd came out on Broadway and Pink Floyd The Wall came out in the same year. And I would lock myself in my bedroom and I would be singing to Sweeney Todd, "Attend the tale of Sweeney," guy cutting up people into meat pies. And then I would be listening to "We Don't Need No Education." And one is a guy, yelling about cutting people up into meat pies. And the other one is this drug addled rock and roller. And I would be singing my ass off in my room. And my mother would go, "Jim, are you okay in there?" So, yeah, I wanted to be. It's one of those things when I would go on as the Phantom. Everybody knew when I was on because you would hear either Bruce Springsteen or Pink Floyd or The Who or some other kind of rock and roll because other people would be warming up going la 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 la. And that's not me. I would be going Um, yeah, one time I got kind of friendly with one of the DJs at the local radio station, and I was just getting ready. I came to the theater early, and I was in the dressing room, just sort of, getting myself settled to go on that night. And I called the guy up at the radio station. I said, "Hey, listen, I'm at the Majestic Theater in the dressing room of the Phantom and the Phantom and the Opera, and I'm on tonight. Could you play?" And he said, "Wait, wait, 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 wait. Start over again. Let me record this." So he recorded it, and I asked him if he would play "Born to Run" with Bruce Springsteen. And I can't remember the Christine that was on that night, but I went up to her dressing room and I knocked on the door. I said, "Come on down here. You got to hear this." So he put on Born to Run, Bruce Springsteen, and I hear that. And in the day we sweated out on the streets of a runaway American dream. And I'm just belting out Born to Run in the dressing room. So everybody knew when I was on because all you would hear is rock and roll coming out of the dressing room.
How did you get in the Phantom cast, and what was your experience like?
I have a weird association with that show. When I was a starving actor in New York, one of my survival jobs was working at an out-of-print record store when there was still vinyl. And this record store specialized in Broadway cast albums, original cast albums, even, foreign ones, soundtracks, and vocals like Frank Sinatra and Edie Adams and Mel Torme and that kind of stuff. And one of my jobs was to clean the albums and the album covers. So one of the owners would put the prices on them. So we had to find out if they were scratched up or that kind of stuff. So that was my job, was to clean the albums. But every now and then when they would get a new show would open, I see you got Les Mis back there. They played Les Mis until the curlicues came off the vinyl. And I thought, well, I can do that. That would be kind of a nice show to be in. And then they got the Phantom album, the London cast album, a little while later when it first opened. And they were playing it constantly in the record store. And I'm going, I might, one of these days get a chance to audition for this. So when it was coming over from London over to New York, I went to, there were two types of auditions that you could go to if you didn't have agents. And at that time, I didn't have an agent. So I was forced to go to one of these two auditions. One's called an EPA, an Equity Principal Audition, where you go into, you sign up, like a week before, and then you have to go back and you have to get a number and you have a time slot. A week later, show up really early in the morning. And then you have to come back about 15 minutes before your time slot. And you get about 5 minutes in the room with the casting people. And there wasn't anybody really from Phantom. It was a casting office that was casting everything on Broadway at that time. They don't exist anymore. But it was the Johnson Lift casting office. And I went into an Equity Principal audition. And I had my sheet music. I sang totally the wrong song. I can't remember what I was dressed up as, but the casting director looked at me and he said, "There's nothing for you in the show, but I'll have you in mind for something else and I'll give you a call." And I didn't hear from him. So I kept on going to more auditions, and I was going to Les Mis auditions. And that time Cats was still there, and they needed pit singers because they padded the chorus with singers down in the pit. So I had an audition for pit singers for Cats, and but this casting office had everything. So they were calling me in for this and that and the other thing. So 2 years later, when it's finally coming into New York, I go to a chorus call, which is, a big cattle call. 200, 300 guys show up at these things. You get there really early in the morning. You try to get a number, and you get, basically go in and sing your best 16 bars. If you get that far, because the further behind they're running with the auditions, it goes from 16 bars to 8 bars. And then my joke was, well, just give us your best note. So, but they also did this thing called typing, where they would herd you in about 25 guys at a time. And you haven't said a word, you haven't sung a note. They're just looking for a physical type. And it's you, stay. The rest of you, thank you very much. And I'm standing in this line with 25 guys, and I'm holding my picture in front of me, like the chorus line thing. And the casting director comes up to me and he looks at my picture and he looks at me and he looks at my picture. He looks at me and he said, "Haven't you sung for me before?" I said, "Yes, 2 years ago. I sang for you and you told me there was nothing for me in the show and you were going to call me for something else, but you never did." And he said, "Will you stay?" And I said, "Yes." So I stayed, sang for him again. And then that casting office just kept on calling me in for this and that. It was for Les Mis, a couple auditions for Les Mis. Then it was some other things that they were doing. And my wife at the time, who was my girlfriend, we were living together. And I said, they want me for something. They just don't know where to put me yet. And finally, they called me in for Raoul understudy, this time at the Majestic Theater to audition on the stage. And it was me, and then there was another guy that was right in back of me, I think, that was going to audition at the same time. And we were both auditioning for the same thing. It was for an understudy for Raoul and the guy who shoots the gun in the pit, the marksman. So I went in. I don't remember what I sang, but I think it was If Ever I Would Leave You, because I had just done Lancelot in summer stock, and it was a song that I knew. I knew it had the low notes. It didn't have the high notes that he needs, but it had the low A flat that he has to sing. So I figured I'd show them some kind of range, and they thanked me for showing up and sort of dismissed me. And as this other guy came into audition, I snuck down underneath the stage because there was a walkway underneath the stage. Just surreptitiously sort of snuck around the theater and I went down underneath the stage and I listened to his audition. And he's the guy that got the job. I didn't. So 3 months later, they call me up and say, would you come in? This is on a Thursday, I think. Yeah, Thursday. Oh, they called me up on a Wednesday. They said, would you come in? This is for the Raoul understudy and this is for the swing job. And I said, sure, because this casting office is calling me, and after a while, it was just, I'm numb. I know they want me for something. I'm just going to go in and do my best job, and I'm not counting on anything. And at the meantime, I'm working as the stage doorman at a chorus line at the Schubert Theater backstage. And at that time, I think Katz passed it up, but it had been running for 18 years. I can't remember. So I've been involved in 2 long-running Broadway shows. But I was working backstage at a chorus line, being the night doorman, taking messages and making sure that everybody's valuables were locked up and all that kind of stuff. And so I go in, they call me up on a Wednesday, said, can you come in tomorrow? They wanted me to sing All I Ask of You. They gave me the sheet music. I had to do a scene. I think they also asked me to dance. It was the first time that they asked anybody to dance, so I had to go with the dance captain at that time. And she put me through the opening of Masquerade, which was tough because I hadn't really danced a lot, which was a reason that I never auditioned for a chorus line because I wasn't a good enough dancer to be in chorus line. So I was comfortable just being there backstage. They asked me to be the doorman at Les Mis, and I said no, because I knew I could do that show, and I didn't want to be known as the doorman who wants to be in Les Mis. But being the doorman who can't be in a chorus line was fine with me. So so I go in and I audition on Thursday. There's one more guy waiting in the wings to audition after me. After I get done singing, they ask me to stay. And I said, okay, fine. This other person goes in and he sings, and they give him the big thank you very much. Thanks for coming in. And he leaves. He's dismissed. Then they bring me back and say, sing something else that you're comfortable with. And I forget what it was that I sang. Maybe If Ever I Would Leave You Again. I don't know. But I sang something else, and they had me do the dance kind of stuff. And this is not a lot of important people were there, but the production stage manager, the music supervisor, the rehearsal pianist, and a few other people that I found out, the dance captain, a few other people I found out about later that I can't remember. But I did all the things that I was supposed to do. And the production supervisor says, we're going to go in the back of the house and talk about you for a while. Just stick around. And I went, okay. So I'm standing on the stage in the Majestic Theater, doing this, waiting for them to make their decision. And they called me back out into the house and next to the piano, the rehearsal piano, and said, you understand what this job is, right? It's a swing job. I said, yeah. And it's an understudy for Raoul. I said, yeah. Said, do you want the job? I fell to my knees and I went, are you kidding? So I got called on Wednesday. I auditioned on Thursday. I signed my contract on Friday. I saw the show for the first time Saturday afternoon, and it was completely sold out. So I had to sit on the stairs to watch the show. And I went into rehearsal on Monday. My life changed that quickly, that fast. And then I stayed there for a long time. But yeah, my life completely turned around. But my other association with Phantom is I was at the opening night party. One of my survival jobs was a cater waiter. And people ask me, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? And I say, cater, because I catered a party at Carnegie Hall. I was on the stage at Carnegie Hall, but I was a cater waiter. I was serving people food. Hated the job, but it was good money. And I got, again, I think Phantom opened on a Thursday, and usually on Broadway openings, the show is early, like 6 o'clock. So they can, everybody can wind down, they can get to the party, they can get the, the newspaper reviews and everything, and then everybody reads the reviews. And but I had to be at the Beacon Theater. They called me up and said, will you cater this party? And I said, sure, what is it? It says, it's the opening night party of Phantom. And I went, okay. So I went to the Beacon Theater. It's up on Broadway, I think 75th Street. We showed up at 4:30, 5 o'clock. And everything, they're getting ready and everything. And the weird thing is they've got this screen that came down, and they're showing the old black and white Lon Chaney movie with not the Phantom music, like da, 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 da. They're not playing that. They're playing the Bach toccata and fugue, da, 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 in back of the Lon Chaney stuff. And finally, somebody decided, well, let's scrap this. We're not going to do that. So they scrapped the screen and the Lon Chaney film and all that kind of stuff. But I was on the stage of the Beacon Theater slopping au gratin potatoes on Michael Crawford's plate. That was my first association with Phantom of the Opera. And years later, I actually get to perform the role when the casting director told me there was nothing for me in the show. So that's how weird things happen when you're a performer.
You played all the male parts in Phantom except Bianchi?
Yeah, they asked me to understudy Piangi 3 times, and I turned it down because, first of all, being a swing and being an understudy, I understudied all the other parts. And it was just constant rehearsal. We had understudy rehearsal like almost every week. So it was like doing 9 shows a week rather than 8 shows a week. Usually on Tuesdays or Thursdays was understudy rehearsal. And it's it's grueling. It's a job. It's a big job. And oftentimes they wouldn't call in enough people for understudy rehearsal to cover all the parts. So being a swing and knowing all the other minor parts, I was often talking to myself and playing against myself on stage, going, Lefebvre is talking to Raoul and Raoul is talking to Lefebvre, and I'm just jumping back and forth talking to myself, just so people have the lines to continue with the scene. It was crazy. It was absolutely crazy, which is why I'm schizophrenic, I suppose. But a fun one was George Lee Andrews, who did originally was the Lion Man and Donatello, but when Nick I can't remember his last name, saved my life right now, but when he left, he played Firmin. When he left, George was slotted into Firmin, but he also understudied Andre, so George knew both parts. And later on, I knew both parts too, because I understudied both of the managers. So one understudy rehearsal, I was doing Firmin to his Andre, or maybe vice versa. But that night we switched roles, which was really kind of weird.
Yes.
But again, that's that schizophrenic nature of what to do. You have to, something about my brain can compartmentalize that kind of stuff. And I just don't know what it is, but I can sort of separate, because I think part of it is, and it's the same thing with the audiobook stuff, is to give those characters their own separate life, is to make them individuals, make them distinct people.
What was your first time playing Phantom like?
I had been rehearsing, understudying it for almost a year before they decided to put me on, and I think it was like Christmas Eve. It was December 23rd, and I think I was scheduled to do 2 performances only, and it was nerve-wracking. I think I was ready. Because I had done all the rehearsing, and I think I was ready to do it, but I hadn't done it with everything, with like the orchestra and the lights and all the set pieces, and I had some of that, but not all of it. So it was just a little bit nerve-wracking, but I think the nerves kind of helped in a way. To get me through it. I do remember one of the stage managers saying offhandedly off stage to another stage manager, going, "He's pretty good." It's like, no, I suck. But I think I was ready for it. The second night, obviously, after opening night, things are a little bit different. Not that it was more comfortable or a letdown or anything, but it was just a little bit more subdued than it was the first night. But let's see, I can flash back to some other things. I was totally, I don't know whether it was illegal or not, according to the union, but I was pretty friendly with the sound guy out at the sound console. And every time I would go on for one of the characters, like Donatello or, one of the fops, or, and excuse me, any of the lesser characters, or when I went on for Raoul, or the managers, and when I think that Phantom, that first one, I have a couple of recordings of that, but he would record it for me. So I had all of these characters. Some of it was on cassette. At that time, they only had cassette. And then when it moved into DVDs, they could burn it on digital. But everyone, I think, Passerino, everything, I asked them to record it for me. And I took all of these recordings, and over the years, it was really kind of weird because the tempos didn't change, the pitches didn't change, everything was pretty much the same. And I'm a good enough audio engineer because I do all my own audio engineering when I do my audiobooks. But I went to audio engineering school as kind of a backup to my acting career. So I was a pretty good audio engineer, and I took all of these bits and pieces of me, and I created a recording of me. I called it Romick of the Opera. So it's just me doing all of the roles. I did have to splice in a couple of things because I didn't do Piangi. I had to find a couple of different Piangis that I liked, that I wanted to record. But I made a two DVD set that I gave to people of Romick of the Opera. I was flattered enough to, someone created a fan club for me. I had a fan club at one time. And it happened completely by accident. A new Phantom had gone into the show, and this woman who was just enamored with the show saw it over and over and over and over again. But she saw this new guy go in, and it was rough, but she wanted to come back later to find out, how he'd improved. And I happened to be on that night, and she didn't know that. And later she found out, because they stuffed the program, said so-and-so is on for so-and-so, So she found out that it was me, and she wrote me a letter. and told me the whole story of, I came, I was expecting to see this. And I thought, he just, man, he really, really got better. And then it was you. And I went, oh, okay. So she created this fan club for me, which was really kind of flattering, very nice. I didn't expect it to last. I mean, the fame and all that kind of stuff is fleeting, but it was very nice, and I appreciated it. What I appreciated more, I think, in that whole experience was, I say this and I joke, but I don't like actors. The actors will come up to you because what do we do? We lie. Actors are liars. We take people's words and we turn them into something. But basically, what we do is we lie. And when another actor would come up to me and say, "Oh, that was really, really good," and then they go to somebody else that I think sucked, and they go, "Oh, that was really, really good," it's like, yeah, okay, who do I believe? What do I believe? So I don't put much stock in what other actors tell me. But the people I valued the most were the stagehands and the people in the front of the house, the ushers and the people that do the concessions and everything, because they see it every night. They're involved in it every night, and they hear the same thing, and they see the same people. But when they come up to you unsolicited and tell you that you did a good job, or say, that moment there, I really, really liked what you did, and I don't ask for it. That was what was satisfying to me. I knew that I was doing something right.
Indeed, when people are there every night and hear it, they can hear the changes and maybe the audience reactions.
Well, I mean, it's a fluid kind of thing. I mean, we get paid a lot of money to do 8 shows a week, and the first show of the week has to be not the same, but it has to have the same energy. The audience has to experience it as if we were doing it for the first time. And that's the whole the obligation of the actor is to make it fresh and new for the audience all the time. And we were constantly having brush up rehearsals. Hal would come in, the music supervisors, David Caddick would come in. We'd have Jillian Lynn come in and run through the dances and all that kind of stuff, because Hal and Jillian kind of split director duties. She handled some staging, and he handled a lot of the acting stuff. So it was, and they didn't always agree on stuff. So it was a kind of a tug and pull, and who do we really listen to? And you kind of do the last thing that the last person told you, and then you adapt when somebody else tells you to do something else. And being an understudy, and even just slotting into the lesser characters in the show, there is a certain flow to the whole thing that has to be maintained. And they kept on saying, make it your own, but I don't think they meant that. Make it your own in the mold of what it is. There were some things that I did that they told me not to do that I kept on doing anyway. I approach a lot of things. One of the ways that I approached Raoul was, especially in the dressing room scene, when he first sees her again, is that all he wants to do is get her out of there and take her to bed. And that's where I come from. I start from the crotch out. So everything it starts sexual with me, and then it goes in a different direction. Then the emotion comes in, and the warmth comes in. And it's kind of not exactly the way that I approached the Phantom, but there is one point at the end of the show where he says, "This is the choice," in the final air scene, and he screams at her. I actually, in rehearsal, I would do this, and they would tell me not to do it, but I'd do it anyway. And I did it in performance for one of the Christines. And I would do it in the Christines that I know that I could get away with it, I would do, where I would actually physically get on top of them, like I was going to rape them. Of course, he wouldn't do that, but at that moment, he is so manic, you don't know what's going to happen. And I wanted that to be so shocking to her and the audience that, they don't know how to feel about this guy. Do they empathize with him? Do they like him? Do they not like him? I mean, he's a terrorist, and he is a murderer. But he also has this huge feeling for this person. So I would physically, I would get down on top of her and scream in her face. And I think it was Sandy Joseph that I did it to first. And when I went, this is the truth, and she screamed at me. And I went to her after the show was done. I went up to her and I said, I'm sorry I did it. No, 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 no. That was great. I loved it. So I knew that, something was working for doing that. Other stupid little things that happen. I used to have this tradition that started, I think, when I was still doing community theater when I was 19, 20. Then on opening night, no matter what it was, I wore red underwear, briefs. I don't know why I did that. I just started doing that. So the first night I was on for Raoul, I had my red underwear on. I do the jump off the bridge into the lake, which I think was really kind of weird too, because there's no splash. I think there should have been a splash, but there was never a splash. But I would jump off the bridge into the lake, and there's a stagehand down. There's a mat down there, but there's a stagehand down there that catches you, and then he takes you off. You get soaked with all the stuff, and then you come back out again. I split my pants from the crotch all the way up to the back in the belt. I completely split my pants. And when I came back up and I went under the portcullis to hug Christine before the Phantom hangs him, they recorded that one too. And if you turn the volume up really, really loud, you can hear me say, "I just split my pants," to her, whispering in her ear. I swear I can hear that. And so we finished the show, and when I went out to take my bow, I completely mooned everybody in the cast with my red underwear. The audience didn't see it, but the entire cast has just started laughing hysterically because I had my red underwear on. And one time as the Phantom, we used to have to do these, they called them curtain speeches for Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS, to raise money for Broadway Cares. And I went into a lunge. Instead of hopping on the Christine, they asked me now, to take her wrists and bring her up. And this is the choice. I lunged at her and I split my pants again. But this was from the crotch down to my knee on my left leg. So my pasty white thigh and my hairy leg was exposed. So to get the audience not to see that, I just sort of looked like I had hurt my leg, and I put my knee in so the audience wouldn't see the open piece of fabric. So I had to go out and do the curtain speech, and I didn't have time to change my pants. So when I came out and I took my bow and I calmed the audience down and I said, I don't want you to think that I hurt myself, but I showed them my leg through the pants, and everybody had a good laugh about that. And then I did the curtain speech and we raised a lot of money, but that was kind of fun. But I don't hide it. I'm rarely embarrassed by anything. And I think it's nice to not only laugh at yourself, but if you can get a laugh, that's fun too.
What are some of the other favorite characters in the show that you had that you've played?
What are my favorites?
Out of all the characters in the show next to Phantom and Raoul, what were some of your favorites?
They all had their things. Ray A was kind of fun. The choir master was kind of fun because one of my stage mentors one time said, "Jim, you got to get in touch with your feminine side." So I did make him overtly gay, but I made him a little bit effeminate. Same thing with Andre. I made him a little, we say light in the loafers, but not really. I want a distinction between him and Firmin. Firmin was this, and he was just concerned about the money, and he was, that kind of guy. And Andre was like just so enamored with Carlotta that he would basically, do anything for her. So I needed to make a distinction between those two guys in my own head to keep them separated when I would go on for one or the other. But Passerino was kind of fun because he's got this goofy costume on and this beard, and uh, he's just a goofball. Um, who else? Uh, Lefebvre, the guy who sells the opera, the previous manager. Um, I tried to make him just a buffoon because he thinks he's in control and he's not. And the reason he just wants to get out of there. He wants to sell it to these new managers, and he just wants to get out of there. All of these motivations that I had in the back of my head for these characters, I tried to make them all. I tried. I don't know how far I succeeded, but I tried to make them all very distinct. And that's again that right brain, left brain kind of thing.
How did you see the Phantom when you played him?
How do I see him? He's a tragic figure, I think, a very Shakespearean kind of tragic figure. I know, the whole self-loathing thing and the uh, he he's a mad genius, but a very pathetic figure. And again, he's a terrorist and a murderer. Uh, uh, I and it's there's a whole bunch of different kind of people that live inside him. Maybe he's a little bit I don't want to say OCD, but um, he's just a real tragic figure. The thing that um, I always sort of attributed to him was controlled rage. You know that he could snap at any minute, but he was in control enough of himself not to go that far, except maybe in that last scene, but not to go too far in front of her anyway. But for everybody else, it didn't matter. Um, One of the things when I was understudying, when I first got the understudy, I had to get permission from the Macintosh office, Cameron Macintosh, to go to Lincoln Center and watch the video of the original cast because they archive those things. But you have to sit there and watch it. You can't take it home or anything like that. So you have to sit there. And this was, VHS cassette before DVDs. So I sat there at Lincoln Center. I watched it. And it was an interesting study. I was watching Michael Crawford a lot. And I don't want to say too much about it, except that in that last scene, you saw him get old. You saw him lose his mind. You saw him get decrepit. You saw him get all those emotions all rolled into this. And Michael Crawford's thing was with his hands. He had he did all of this hand acting, which was terrific. But I don't know that I could accomplish that. I didn't know that not that I didn't have the talent, but I didn't know if that was the direction I wanted to go in. But one of the stupid little tricks that I did right before that last scene, right before we go out for that final scene, is I would take the sleeves of my tux jacket and pull them up a little bit. So I exposed a little bit more of the white. So it was kind of bunched up here, but you saw more of the white, which made my arms look a little bit longer. And I hunched over ever so slightly so that my posture wasn't as perfect as it is at the beginning because, it's all pulled up and he's all very elegant. But I wanted him more, not, I don't want to say human, but more decrepit. And it just made him older for me. It just little tricks that I did to do things like that to make him seem older. And the thing right before he sings the last, you alone can, that bit where he goes to the monkey and he finds the veil on the stage where she's left the veil. Um, I'm kind of shameless in some respects because I steal things from other actors. I don't think that that's wrong. If it's working and it looks good, I will steal it. And there was something that one of the guys did when he went to the monkey, where the monkey is doing this, and he would just hunch over and he was watching the monkey, and you could see that he just lost his mind. And I did that. And then when I picked up the veil, I saw her in the veil, so I would stroke her hair in the veil. So I saw her in person as a person inside there. So he's imagining, what might have been. And then the You Alone, because I had gone earlier in my life, gone through a very nasty breakup with somebody that I was really in love with. And I used that. I'm not a method actor by any means, but I used that. And what was hard was in that final scene, I'm actually crying. I cried during that, and those tears or that emotion that you saw me do was real, because I was flashing back to that unrequited love, that unrequited breakup kind of thing. And that was hard to get through, because I have to sing those high notes, and when you're getting emotional, your throat's just closing up. Now, other people just get past it, but I had to find a way to do that emotion at the same time being able to power through the rest of the show to get it done. So, but that was just me. The nice thing is that as long as I was there, I was fortunate enough to see a lot of guys come and go, not only phantoms, but understudies. And like I said, I'm shameless. I stole from some of them. I would look at some of them saying, why the hell are you doing that? That's, but that's just me being judgmental. But I stole bits and pieces of other guys' performances that I incorporated into what I was doing. One thing, I think it was Davis Gaines. I was way up ready to climb down the portcullis at the end of the show, and I would watch him do the final scene where he would get out of the chair before he goes to hang Raoul, and he would get out of the chair, and he did this thing with his tails, with his tail coat, that he sort of flipped it, and the tails would flare out, and he looked like a spider. And the first time I saw it, I thought, well, that's interesting. I wonder if that's just something that happened. And then I saw it happen again and again and again. And I thought, he really studied this. He really mapped this out for himself, because it is so effective. But he looks like a spider ready to catch the fly. And it was just chilling. It was a stupid little thing that happens, but it was just chilling to me. And I couldn't do that, but I did some other things, like with the cape, covering her, or taking the cape off in the first, when they first go down into the lair. Just, I worked out a way to make that cape really flourish, and drape it onto the boat, but it's something that I had to work out over and over and over again to make happen exactly right. Because if it didn't happen right, it would look pretty bad.
What are some of your favorite memories of the show, or other things that you've done?
Memories of the show, when things went wrong. Most of the time. I was on for Raoul one time, and it was that crossover scene after Masquerade when the lights go out. It's a crossover, they're taking the stairs away and they're resetting the scene for something else. And I'm not going to say who the Madame Jury was, but I went to grab her with the lantern and everything, and I turned her around and I went, Madame Jury, please. And she has this long speech that she has to do, and I just saw the lights go out. She went blank. There's no way for Raoul to help her. I mean, I don't know the story. I can't tell the story. She tells the story. And she just went to Pluto for a second. And it only lasted for 10 seconds, maybe shorter than that. But I've been on stage when I've seen people just, they don't know where they are. And she had no clue who she was. And it was like, okay, what do I do now? There was one where Georgia Lee Andrews was doing Firmin, and they get notes. It's in the first manager scene, and they read the notes, and the Phantom's voice is supposed to come in when he says, "A gentleman, I have now sent you several notes of the most amiable nature," and he's got this whole speech to cue the sound guy. Because of that, the Phantom reading the note is on tape because he's changing his clothes. And George had never bothered to memorize the notes. So they were actually printed out so you could read them. He got the wrong note. And he went, "Gentlemen, I can't read this." And he's trying to cue the sound guy to bring in the Phantom's voice because he's got the wrong note and he doesn't know what he's saying. So that was I was in my dressing room and I heard it. I saw it happen, but I wasn't on stage for that one. But the "I can't read this" is always a fun memory. Being on stage with George was just a joy. He's so much fun to work with. And like I said, there were people that you knew you could play with
Yes.
during the show, and then there were people that you knew you couldn't. There were people that they expected this, and if you didn't give them that, they would go to the stage manager and said, "What the hell is he doing? Why is he doing that? He should be doing." So there were a lot of those kind of moments too, where people would get ticked off at other people even on stage and do weird things. So I mean, it's not all fun and games.
What was some of your favorite Christine's, Phantoms, or Raoul's to work with?
Oh God. I just saw you a few weeks ago. You did an interview with Lisa Vroman.
Yes.
I don't want to pick favorites, but she and I, we just clicked. She was one of the most wonderful people to work with on stage because she rolled with the punches and so did I. And it was one of those things where, let's just play and do some things within the confines of what we needed to do. But I had the greatest time with her on stage. There were a lot of the others that were just really, really sweet. And we, if there was something that we needed to iron out, there a lot of physicality that had to go on. I know, like when she unmasks him at the end of the Don Juan thing, there were a couple of times when one of the Christines was really kind of aggressive and basically took my wig off with it. So, and I was a sweater, so sometimes the skull cap that was glued to the back of my neck would loosen up. So when she took the mask and the wig off, the stuff that was underneath, one time there was like a flap of skin that came over my eyes. So I mean, it's those things that you sort of roll with. But yeah, there were others. I again can't name names and not Christine's, but there were other people in the cast that were very hard to be on stage with. Some weren't very giving on stage. It was like being on stage alone. They were alone and you were alone, and there was no interaction when there needed to be. There were people on the opposite end of the spectrum that were very giving on stage. There were people that I worked with, mainly in the chorus, that had no business being on that stage. And I'll just leave that alone.
What are some of your favorite roles from your other stage work?
Oh, listen. I did my first 1776 was Thomas Jefferson when I was 19. And that was just thrilling. That's one of my top 3 favorite shows. I did Jesus and Godspell. I did 2 Godspells, but I did Jesus and Godspell when I was, I think, 20 or 21, 20, I think. That was incredible. And for that show, that cast, no matter what cast you're in, is really kind of tight because everybody is just, really close in that kind of a show. I did another 1776 where I did Edward Rutledge, who is the guy who almost blows everything up because of the slave trade and everything. And he's got that 11 o'clock number, Molasses to Rum to Slaves. And that was just a powerhouse thing to sing and perform. And it grabs the audience by the throat and just won't let go. And it's like real near to the end of the show. That's just a thrilling thing. And after that number is over, the entire Southern Coalition walks out, and you don't know that this is ever going to work. Even though America becomes America, but you don't know from that point on whether this is actually going to happen or not. I have had very few what I call peak experiences on stage where everything just seemed to go right, and I don't know that I could have done anything better. I think I had 2 in Phantom when I was doing Phantom, doing the role. In the 379 performances that I did, I think I only had 2 that I think that were as good as I could have gotten, and couldn't have done any better. And another one was the opening night performance of Camelot as Lancelot up in Maine, which was really kind of weird because my aforementioned voice teacher in college started that theater with the woman who was the producer there, and he was at the opening night performance. I didn't know that until he came backstage that after the show, but I got through Samoa and did the whole thing, and I don't know that I could have done any better in that performance that opening night than I did. But those are like the only 3 in my entire career that I think that were peak experiences. All the rest of them is like, I might have done better. So it's not a matter of not being satisfied. It's a matter of striving to be a better actor, a better performer. When you think, my thing is, when you think that you there's no more that you can do, then you might as well give up.
I also saw you create physical art.
But you can see that I have the my toolbox in the background. In this den that I have, my recording studio is right over on this wall, but one of the walls is all my woodworking stuff because I make things. The show was really good to me. I made a lot of money, and I have a garage full of power tools, so I make things out of wood like this. I don't know if you can see it. There's a oh, you can't see it. There's a bookshelf over here that I made. So half of it is woodworking stuff. The other half is the theater stuff. And then I have my voice booth on the other side of the wall.
Yes,
So
I
this
read
is
that.
my...
The woodworking. You also did a very special Phantom one for Howard McGillan, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let me see. I can't show you a picture. Yeah. When Howard was leaving the show, we knew when he was going because he, made up in his mind that he wanted to go and do something else. And Howard at that time had the most performances. It was 2,400 and some odd performances. I can't remember exactly. But as he was leaving that night, we had a party for him. And as he was leaving that night, I said, Howard, I want to make you something, but it's going to take me a little while. It'll take me about, a couple of months. And I made what I called the Phantom Urn. It's about 2 feet tall and about 12 inches around, with little windows that have the Phantom mask in it. But I made it out of 2,400 and some odd whatever pieces of wood that matched the number of performances that he gave. And I gave it to him about 2 months later it took about 2.5 months to make and design. But yeah, and well, there was one in the bottom. There's a plug in the bottom because I had to put a plug in the bottom. One show, he lost his voice right after Music of the Night, and I wasn't on for anybody that night. I was sitting out in the alley at the Majestic, just reading a book, and one of the stage managers came out and said, "Jim, you're on," and I went, "Okay, well." They said, "No, the Phantom," and I went, "Well, I have to shave." She said, "There's no time for you to shave. You have to," because I was a little scraggly. Said, "You have to get in your costume because Howard's out." And I went, "Oh, okay." So during the show, from Music of the Night on, Howard finished that, and then I went in after that. And during the show, piece by piece, they're putting the prosthetics on and putting the alopecia on, and getting the costumes and everything. And by the end of the show, I would basically totally made up. So, but it happened. But I said, Howard, this little plug down in the bottom, because I signed it and I dated it, and I said, so many performances and everything. Said that little piece of wood, that's my half performance. That's me. But yeah, he and I got along really, really well, and I admired everything that he did. Wonderful human being. But I wanted to do something because I think what they gave him was like a silver-plated mask. I don't mean to knock the people that I worked for, but I'm going to. I think it was a very it was not a terrific gift for a parting gift. It was worse than getting that gold watch when you retire kind of thing. But I wanted to make him something memorable and something meaningful. I also made a second one. A fellow woodworker of mine does these wonderful, wonderful. I don't know exactly what you would call them, but they're like wall hangings. And we sort of got friendly. I used to go to like woodworking conventions, and I sat in on one of his presentations one time, and I went up to him before he was presenting, and I told him who I was and what I did, and he said, "You're kidding. My wife and I love that show," and blah, 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 blah. And right at the beginning of his presentation, I said, "Well, I came here just to meet you because I really admire your work." And before he began his presentation, he said, "You see this guy over here? He's in Phantom of the Opera, and he's here to see me." So he was really thrilled about that. So what happened was I made another Phantom urn, a little bit different, and we swapped pieces. I made it for him, and he made a piece for my wife and I. That's down in my living room right now. And he's from, I want to say, Vancouver, Canada, on Victoria Island, I think, in Canada. And his pieces sell for thousands of dollars. And we just swapped. It was really kind of nice.
I love all the creativity that you used to have.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you would wish to add to the interview that hasn't been asked, but that you want everybody to know?
For me personally, I mean, it was a very fulfilling time in my life. It seems like it was a lifetime ago. It was a different life ago. There were lots of highs and lots of lows. One of the things, and this is probably maybe a little bit unfair to say, and I don't know whether it was deliberate or whether it was just happenstance, but almost all of the main characters had 2, if not 3, understudies, and it seemed, it had the appearance that the powers that be were always pitting us against each other. There was always a competition, and when one or the other would go on over the other, who had maybe just done an understudy rehearsal, and then that night the other understudy is on who hadn't been to that rehearsal, there was a lot of resentment. There was a lot of anger, a lot of bad feeling I know that I felt it. I am guilty of professional jealousy. I know that about myself, so it's just my own character flaw. But yeah, I was often resentful when one of the other guys would go on when I know that it was not my turn, but um, I'm emotionally and mentally, it was a strain. It was hard. Not only that, there were times when I was slated to go on for one of the characters and something else would happen. Somebody else would get sick and they would need me to fill in that other thing. And when we went on for the principal roles, we got paid extra. Well, it was like yanking money out of my pocket. So, yeah, that fosters a little bit of resentment. Yeah, so it's a job like any other job, you know. But we try, or at least I tried as best I could to put all of that aside when I went on stage. And then when I would leave the stage or I would leave the theater, I would pick it back up and take it home with me. I would try not to have that affect what I did on stage, at least anyway. Because I was on stage with people, some people that I just did not like. I just did not get along with. But that was part of my job. I had to be on stage with these people. I had to, I was getting paid a lot of money. I had to perform. And it's not necessarily just that show. There are other shows too that I'm a hard case sometimes.
Would you still return to the theater? Do you still have a role you might want to come back to?
Things are kind of mellow now. I mean, I'm older. I've not resigned myself to my lot in life, but I'm pretty much set. Um, the show was very good to me. We had a what we call a 401k savings plan that I dumped as much money into as I possibly could. My wife and I have investments and savings, and we're doing okay. So money wise, and thank goodness we don't live out in California because I feel for those people. I have friends that have lost everything out there. Um, but we're okay. And I will, even if I never get on stage again, I will be fine. Which is one of the reasons why, I fell into audiobooks because even if when I'm in there all by myself, I'm still acting and I'm directing. What do you want to do? Really wanted to be a director. Well, yeah, I'm directing myself and I'm acting and I'm making judgments on my performance and what I'm doing. So, and not everybody's cut out to do audiobook work. I'm doing a class in a couple of weeks for the Union Foundation voiceover lab, the SAG-AFTRA Foundation voiceover lab in New York City. Well, it's going to be a virtual Zoom kind of thing about how to get into audiobooks. And one of the things is be honest with yourself. Is it something that you really want to do? Because it's a lot of work. It's very you're by yourself for hours and hours and hours at a time, and you have to be comfortable with being by yourself and acting into this little stupid metal tube.
Do you still still sing? Do you miss singing?
Well, this is one of the crazy things that happened right before the pandemic hit. A fellow narrator had started a company called Bookworm Theatrics. It was supposed to be to raise money for underprivileged kids to buy books for them to read or that kind of thing. And she put together this show, which was only going to have two performances, but it was going to be off Broadway at the Alvin Ailey Center in New York City. And she needed a certain character, and it was a show about everybody had to have an Irish accent. Not all of us succeeded totally, but so I sent her basically an audition with my Irish accent, And she said, yeah, let's do this. And it was mostly audiobook narrators who had other performing experience. Some were stand-up comics, some had done musicals before, some hadn't. But it was interesting, and I hadn't like sung seriously in quite a long time. And I had a couple of big numbers. And I thought, am I still going to be able to do this? Not only that, am I going to be able to memorize all these lines? Because I'm not memorizing lines anymore. I'm just reading from a manuscript. So you don't memorize the whole book. You don't memorize the whole book? No. You read it cold. So I didn't know if my memory was going to work, because my voice teacher in college, he quit performing, period, because he could not remember his lines. And he knew that about himself. And I was kind of fearful that that was happening to me, that I wasn't going to be able to remember all my lines, because being a swing, I used to have this dream. The actor's nightmare is usually where you go on stage and you don't know what you're doing, and everybody else knows what they're doing, and maybe you don't have any pants on or whatever. I have the actor's nightmare in reverse. I know all the lines. I know everybody's characters, and people are wandering around the stage and they don't know what they're doing. So I have the actor's nightmare in reverse. But I was having one of those, is this going to be the actor's nightmare for me, where I'm going on stage without my pants on and I don't know what my lines are. But it worked out fine. I mean, it was a nice thing to do. And then the pandemic hit. And that was the end of that. Actually, it was like the next day. Our show closed, and the next day, everything went to hell.
Yeah.
I could talk your ear off. I mean, I watched your Lisa Vroman interview, and I'm like Lisa. I could talk a blue streak. I'll talk to you for hours and hours and hours if you want. Uh, and Lisa's gregarious like that too.
Yes.
Yeah, I really liked working with her. She was a sweetheart.
She also
With nice thing
with.
too is I just told my wife this. I just remembered this the other day. I was on for the Phantom one night, and she was on my Christine, and she went to school with Renee Fleming, the opera singer. And Renee Fleming just happened to be there that night and came up to the dressing room and introduced herself. And it was, I mean, a thrill to meet this major opera singer when I don't really like opera, which is weird.
I think that did work with Phantom, because I heard Andrew ever wanted him to be a rock singer, though.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, the thing is, in The Angel, right before the close of the first act, where he goes, "You will curse today, you will not do." A lot of guys, what Hal wanted was to go and do that kind of thing. Well, my approach was to come down on it, because working up and then trying to do that up again was really kind of hard. But I wanted to come down on, no, you will curse. So I came down from the top to get to the note and then go back up again. But that is my Roger Waters scream at the end of the first side of Pink Floyd, The Wall. No, we don't need no edges. So that's where I got that. So yeah, I wanted to be a rock and roll singer too. Like I said, I wore the curly cues off of Jesus Christ Superstar when I was in high school, which tells you how old I am. Because I wanted to sing in that show. Never got a chance.
A wonderful show as well.
Yeah, and it was a kind of groundbreaking for. I mean, even the title, Jesus Christ Superstar. I mean, they took him and Andrew Tim Rice took a lot of flack for that. I remember when it first came out, and it was like that was also kind of at the beginning of my Jesus Freak stage, which I no longer have. I was trying to understand. I was trying to, again, find my way of what was going on with my life at the time. But yeah, I would sing to the Garden of Gethsemane scene over and over and over and over again until my voice was raw. I just wanted to do that show. And then the Judas thing. Oh, I had a friend. I mentioned doing that 1776. The guy who played Edward Rutledge in that one when I was 19 years old, I went to college with him. He was a much older, but he also had a brief Broadway career. He understudied Pontius Pilate in the Broadway production of Jesus Christ Superstar when it first came into New York. And the night that he was on, when he was going off the stage, he was supposed to, they were carrying, a bunch of people were carrying him, and he was supposed to fall back, and somebody was supposed to catch him. Well, whoever was there didn't catch him, and he fell on his back on the off stage and ruined his back, and he was never right after that. He had to give up and come back, and he became a music student at the same school that I went to. But when he played Edward Rutledge in that show, and he sang that Molasses to Rum number, I again, stealing from people, I stole directly from him when I did it years later. I, embellished it. I tried to give it my own spin, but he did. It was just something that made such an impression on me that I wanted to. I did my best impression of him.
So interesting, everything that happens, but also the things you never hear about. Everything that happens in backstage or the influences. There's so much going on in theater all the time.
Yeah, I had the first Camelot I did when I first got my union card. I became a professional actor because my union card said so. I was doing Camelot, and the guy who was playing King Arthur was a real stickler for people backstage not making any noise at all, because if there was any noise backstage, it threw him off. And he'd done the role countless times in other productions, but he demanded that it be absolutely quiet backstage. And I was one of those people early in my career where I would not, go back to the dressing room and kibitz with everybody else. I wanted to watch other actors do what they were doing because I wanted to learn from them. And he's one of the more influential people that I learned a lot of what I do. I'm not a trained actor. I never went to acting school. I have had some private coaching here and there, but everything I know is from just performing on stage and watching other actors and learning from them and stealing from them because I have no shame.
Thank you so much for this, for your time on this lovely interview. It was so great talking to you.
You're welcome. It's nice to make you laugh. Because, this can be some like really, really serious stuff, and it doesn't have to be. The one thing I try not to do is take myself too seriously. It gives me gray hair.
It's so great to hear your memories and well, learning some new facts all the time. It's
Oh, honey, the things I could tell. I got a million of them. Like I said, I could write a book, but there are a lot of people that have to no longer be living for me to tell stories about because I could get sued for defamation, I guess, or telling the truth. I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot up here. Bye, people out there. Hope you had a good time. And if you didn't, don't say anything.
Bye.
Behind the Mirror of Music with Dannii Cohen.